Yeah, so just let me know when you want me to start. Do you record or not? hmm Okay, you want me to start?
You are most welcome, madam. Please discuss.
Okay, thank
Go on,
you.
sir. Go on, sir.
Just checking. It was just not quite the top of the hour, so just wanted to check with you. Thank you so much for having me today and welcome everyone. Thank you so much. Welcome everyone. For you, most of you, it's the evening. Here it's the morning for me, and you can see the morning light streaming in. So it's interesting and wonderful that we can meet this way all over the world. And when we talk about our authentic life and who we are as people, we have to start at why we don't feel that way. What happens in our lives that doesn't allow us to just have that automatically? You know, when you think about it, it's like we're born into this world and we come in with the truth of who we are, and then what happens to us over our lifetime. And especially for women, right? We feel often we are very mean to ourselves. We beat ourselves up for feeling like a fraud. And it's not just women, but a lot of women go through this, especially if they're in the business world and they see inequities in the world. And so they take that on personally. And there's a lot of self-doubt. And why this happens is the systemic inequities, yes, and culture and all these different things play into it. So these tools and strategies that others use really keep women from feeling balanced in their life. And there's a perpetuation of misogyny and an idea of let's keep people where they are. And things happen like gaslighting. You may or may not be familiar with that word, but it's really making us question when we say something or do something, and someone will come in and then we start to take it personally and we think, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that or done that. And so we start to question ourselves. And we see this in society about blaming the victim. You know, it was her fault. She was dressed this way. They did this, rather than seeing that we all have responsibility. And so there's this deflection back to you to take full responsibility instead of taking what is yours and keeping that separate from what is someone else's. If you think about the word responsibility, it's response ability. What is my ability to respond? And knowing that for yourself. And we talk about imposter syndrome. And this woman has a really good talk that I've seen from Smith College, Reshma Saujani, and talks about it's a scheme, again, to keep us in our place. And it's really not true. So culture, and a lot of this comes from childhood patterns where we learn these things really young. We take on that responsibility too young. I know for myself, my mom had mental illness, so I remember from a very young age being overly responsible, kind of being that adult more than she was. she counted on me to kind of keep her grounded and really alive. She would attempt suicide, and the first time I remember I was 4. So that was a lot for a kid. So I never felt I really had that childhood. So that set me up in different ways for taking on responsibility in relationships and doubting myself and all of these different patterns. So what we have to do is have that awareness to unlearn those patterns. And psychology shows us that under stress, we do revert back to the old patterns. It's just built into our brain, unless we've done something to overtake that. So we can learn new ways. We have what's called neural pathways in our brain. So if you think about a rutted road, maybe it's a muddy road and your car is driving down that road. It's so much easier to go in the ruts that others have made before you rather than pick a new route. So that's like the neural pathways in our brain. So we need to build in new practices, bring in awarenesses for where that came in so we can choose differently. So the good news is with neurobiology, we know that we can change at any age. We don't have the excuse anymore that, oh, I'm too old to learn. We can learn at any age. So that's the good news, but also we can't use that excuse anymore. And it's called neuroplasticity, if you're interested in learning more about that. The problem is, though, because it's like a fish in water or we're inside the picture frame looking out, we really can't do it for ourselves. For example, if you asked your friend, what are the things that I say all the time or that I do all the time? And they'll say, oh, you say this particular phrase. What's wrong with them, or whatever the phrase is that you use. Often we're surprised. Oh, do I do that? It's just such a habit for us. We don't even think about what we're saying. So that starts to give us some clues. So it really helps to have someone who can step back and not be so concerned about the outcome, what we call detachment from that place of having neutrality. So we're not buying in so much, we're not so emotionally invested in what the outcome is. So we can help to give that new perspective. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but there are 2 types of mindsets, which is the growth and the other one that's kind of more stable. We keep things the same. We don't really want any new information because that might rock the boat. But if we're really open, and this is part of the problem, right? There's that resistance when we want to learn new things or create new habits. And studies have shown, we used to say 21 days to a new habit. That's not true. It was based on false information. It's 66 days or longer. So what can we do? We also know that we tend to catastrophize things. It's all or none. So in my journey, I had cancer 24 years ago, and I had really stuffed down my emotions. My mom was challenged, my dad was alcoholic. So I didn't want to feel all those things. I didn't know how to be in the world and have all of that chaos around me. And so I felt like if I went into my emotions and dealt with that, I'd never come out. I'd be in the deep, and it's like, what am I going to do? I'm never going to get to the other side. Well, you can see I did. So there is hope for everyone. But really making friends with our emotions to be able to say, yeah, there are some difficult challenges that I've had, and being kind and considerate to ourselves. We often treat ourselves more harshly than we do other people. And that's because, again, that's a childhood pattern where we take on what the adults have done to us, whether it's in our family. Of course, they don't mean to do that, but it's just they haven't learned either. right? We're not taught how to parent. We're not taught how to have good communication. And I was terrible at communication. I did not know how to do things. And because I was so shy and quiet as a kid, because I was so afraid, I did what was called passive aggressive behavior. And I'm sure many of you probably have some part of that. And we need to just say, yeah, that's what I learned. I didn't learn those skills. So I actually trained in conflict resolution because I didn't have those skills. And I learned so many great ways to be able to work with mediation with other people and negotiation to bring my full self into the equation, which I wasn't able to do before. I'd always defer to other people. So we also know that there's a negativity bias built into us as humans. And so when you assess a situation, the negative outweighs the positive. There is no balance there. So we need to be aware of that. So that's part of why we catastrophize and we see the worst. And there's many other types of bias around ourselves, others, interpersonal, social belonging. If a good example is, you think, I'm going to get a new car and I'm going to pick a red car. And all of a sudden, all you see is red cars. You never noticed them before, but all of a sudden they're all there. Were they not there before? No, it's just simply that you now notice it. So what do? We bring in the kindness and compassion, just like we would do for someone else. We understand that we have this safety lens that we want to keep safe. The little young parts of ourselves want to feel safe. Our ego is there. We don't make the ego wrong. We just know that it's there. It wants to protect us. And so we know that these ego defense mechanisms start at a very young age. And so this is why it can be really hard, especially if you're in the entrepreneurial world, to step up, right? It's something we're not used to. It's all the doubt comes in, who's going to listen to me, all these different things. I can't do it, it's too hard. And so this is why we see a lot out there on gratitude. That helps to shift that mindset to say, I did it, and take those small victories and celebrations. We don't celebrate ourselves enough. So really seeing the ego as just one aspect of ourselves, that it wants to keep us safe, that it wants to keep the status quo. And then we can start to question that. Am I really not in a safe situation? And this is something you can do throughout your day. Am I safe? No? Well, what do I need to feel safe? Am I? Yes. Can I feel my feet on the floor so I know that I am here, I am safe, I am present? And one of the things that I love to do in my morning, besides meditation, which I'll talk about in a moment, is a centering practice. I'm an Enneagram teacher, and one of the things that we teach is the centering practice, where we spend a few minutes in our body, noticing the sensations, making that turn inward to what's going on with me right here, right now. The heart center, what are the feelings that are coming up? What are the emotions? And being okay with different emotions being present at the same time. So often we think that there's only one, but no, there can be many, right? We're multi-dimensional beings. So we can really be open to different ways of looking at that. And then the head center, and letting the thoughts just kind of drift through, and having that sense of a bigger opening to that universal knowledge and huge opening to what is, that we can just tap into. One of my teachers, Dan Siegel, he does neurobiology, and he talks about mui. So it's me and we. So when we focus on you being present and this universal knowledge, it becomes we. We're connected with everyone else. You know, loneliness is this epidemic we talk about, but this is one way to really connect with everyone and feel that connection in your life. And then spending a moment, like about a minute, just noticing all three together, how they support each other. We each have a tendency to prefer one over the other. For me, it's the head center. So I have to really work with myself to say, where am I out of balance? Am I feeling my body? Am I present to it? And that was a big challenge for me because of chronic issues with problems from the cancer. I have a lymphatic situation with my body. And loving my body anyway, you know, I'm not making it wrong. It's doing its best. It got me through so many situations. So I need to have gratitude for that. And being okay with that. And so we need to learn to not take things personally. So if you think about a tiger in the woods, you're just walking along, the tiger's hungry, it jumps out and eats you. It's not personal. It was just hungry. So we need to think about that with people as well. Can I see that it just happened is probably more about them than me? However, they do reflect back aspects of yourself. And this is why we learn so much in relationships. This is our learning ground in life. What can I learn about myself through my interactions with others? And so this is really important to say, you know, that's them, that's not me. And we're all very sensitive in some ways. Now we talk about empaths. Well, we all are to a certain degree. So we need to learn to understand what's yours and what's mine as far as emotional boundaries go. And this I learned when I was returning to work after cancer, and I'd gone really deep. I'd gone into all my feelings, and I was really feeling vulnerable. And I thought, how can I return to work? All these people are so stressed out. You know, I thought I was going to have to go on disability. And I met someone who said, oh, I took this class where you get energy shields and you know what's yours and what's the other person's. I was in the class the next week and I felt better already. So I've been teaching this active style of meditation for over 20 years now. And it was a lifesaver for me. And we even teach the children, right? They get their little bubble and the hearts come through and the arrows bounce off. And they learn to stand up to the bullies. They learn that this is my energy. No one has the right but me, unless I invite you in. So it's very powerful to have that sense of, I'm safe. I know what's mine, what's yours. Another example, say you feel great. You go to a party, and all of a sudden, within like half an hour, you feel awful. Well, was it really your feelings or was it someone else's? So you can think about different situations in your life and start to question, you know, was it really you? The other thing is being able to accept tension and conflict are part of life. And I had to learn that too, right? That I could stand up for myself. So learn about it both within us and with other people, because we do have internal conflicts, right? Part of us, if you're an entrepreneur, often I do a motivational map process that shows you where your motivation is and those potential tensions. If I have a high achievement score, for example, and I really want to make money, that's great. But maybe I also have this other motivator that's more about growth. And I just want to learn, and I have the shiny object syndrome, and I'm going from here to there. So how do I reconcile that? Because part of me wants to make money too. So we learn to separate those out and say, well, what's more important right now? Okay, I need to have that stability with making money. So maybe 80% of what I do is there's some kind of benefit from it. The other 20%, I'm going to do some pro bono or like this, doing some speaking engagements to support others, so that we can have those needs met. But if we don't know what those are, we're going around blindly doing things and we're feeling pulled in different directions and we don't know why. And so it's really helpful when we know that. We talk about making the invisible visible. Our studies show that over 95% of people don't know what their motivators are. When we do the assessment, we have them score themselves, their top 3 and their bottom 1 before they get their results. And I've maybe had 2 people know what those are. And so the bottom 1 can also give us a lot of information. So for me, when I was working in an office, I was really focused on doing my work, working out at lunchtime. That was my only time. I was still teaching the meditation in the evening. So I didn't have a lot of time for friendships in the workplace. And so I saw those people that needed a lot of my time as needy. And I had to reframe that and see it differently once I became an entrepreneur, where it's based on relationships. And so learning to bring in a new perspective of I need to build those relationships. And even though I can go for a long time without connecting, other people need that more. So really making sure that I'm making those connections more frequently and making sure other people's needs are met and bringing in new perspective of, why they are doing that. And really the main point I would say is knowing who you are. When we can say, I know what's important to me, we have that strength in ourselves. And when those other things happen, like the doubt come in or other people try to knock you off balance, you can say, well, that's not true, right? We can question that and we can really move beyond that. And our relationships are better with ourselves, with each other, and our whole life takes on a new way of being where we feel more relaxed. We're not waiting for something to come at us. So often I see people, we don't really live in our bodies. We have this tension, we don't relax. And a lot of that is because we're being reactive rather than knowing who we are, having that ground, that stability, and really allowing ourselves to go through our day, taking the time. We're zipping through most of the time. And if we don't slow down, often we get some message, and the last place we're going to listen, our physicality. And that's what happened to me. I was doing everything. Working full time, doing the strata, doing the teaching, union work, all these different things, and something had to give, right? And it was my body because I wasn't doing the self-care. And self-care is one of those things that there's a lot of, I think, misinformation about that as well. Self-care doesn't mean I get to indulge and just sit on the sofa and watch Netflix or eat my chocolates and glass of wine. It means having that flow, that harmony to say, yes, I've worked hard, I've done this, I've done that. My body needs something, I need rest. I need to turn off whatever the electronics earlier in the evening to have my mind rest before I go to bed so I can sleep and not have these looping thoughts in my head. And part of that is our personality type. And that's why I love the Enneagram, to let us see what is that lens of the world. And for me and my type, it was the safety. So I was looking for the danger everywhere. I also have the gifts from there where I can do like project management. I love doing that. What is the big picture? Where are the gaps? What do we need to fill in? What can we do to make things better? So all of these places where it was really positive, but also that place where I could get into the looping thoughts and do too much planning and figuring it out. So learning to be able to relax about that has been really helpful and really a big part of my journey. Did you want time for questions? I just have another comment maybe and then open up for questions, or how would you like to do that? Okay. Yeah, so one of the main, I say sort of a mantra for myself, is what I learned in conflict resolution. And if you remember nothing else from today, this is my little gift to you, is be curious, all behavior makes sense. So whether or not you understand from the other person why they did that or what's going on for them, instead of coming from that defensive place or judgment place, really think about what's going on. Bring in that curiosity and maybe open up to some open-ended questions. What is going on for you? Why do you see it that way? And this is how we build understanding and can get past those impasses and judgments to really get to know people better and to bring more calmness and deeper relationships into our life and have that way of learning reciprocity between people and being able to go deeper. So I'll open it up from there. Thank you so much for having me today. And yeah, if people aren't familiar with shadow work, it's where we go deeper and we look at the parts of ourselves to say, why is that there? Why am I ignoring it? So the example I like to give is jealousy. Why would I want to feel that? So I ignore it and push it away. But it's going to come out in some way. It's going to self-sabotage you because you're not dealing with it. So what we do is go in and help you make friends with it, see why it's there and why it came in. And often there's some positive reason. And for myself, when I did that, it was like, oh, it just tells me I desire that. So whether it's the relationship, the job, whatever it is for you, then it doesn't hold that weight, right? We can say, oh, that just is telling me that. And so it's conscious for you.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for this. For me, it was the best one till now. So maybe because I feel it quite familiar. It is what I try to teach my students. So I'm a leadership coach. I work here in a college in India, and for me was brilliant how you put together everything. Even this idea of the disease is coming from a Buddhist tradition, so so I think here in India we are quite familiar, and it was a very, very nice to hear your presentation. I loved it. Thank you so much.
जी नमस्ते मैडम, सभी को नमस्कार। मैडम आपका स्वागत है भारत में। और मैडम मेरा सवाल है कि टच टेक्नोलॉजी ईरा यानी स्पर्श तकनीकी युग और अनावश्यक इच्छाएं, व्यक्ति इन दोनों के बीच में उलझ गया है, आपको क्या लगता है?
I think ma'am have not heard, sir. She couldn't get properly.
Okay, you're cutting out a bit. That's why I'm having trouble. I heard the equipment and was it to do with connecting because of that? Yeah, if you can type anything that can maybe answer it. But if how we progress because of the technology. One of the things is still understanding what our specific needs are. So, for example, if I'm more interested in the achievement, how can we understand each other? Often we think of problems as personality conflicts when really it's a motivational conflict. So once we can understand each other and what's important, then we can choose to have that connection differently. So whether it's remote, hybrid, yes, a lot of people are on the technology. And part of the reason for this big epidemic with loneliness is because we're not connecting, but we're not realizing our needs for that. So if you're the manager or the person that's running the company, you know, for example, when companies are in growth, there's often this gap because we're so focused on the production, we forget about the people connections. So we need to constantly be looking at what are our needs internally and externally, and how can we bring people together, like with this technology, and still include them so people feel more included. And, you know, the studies show that people often will stay in jobs because of the connections, not necessarily due to the money, although that's changing a bit with, you know, the high inflation, but still it's often not the money. That's the old way of thinking. You know, it was the carrot and stick and everyone was motivated by money. That's not true. We see that with the studies, and that's why the map gives us a way to look at a reward system that is more fine-tuned to individuals and what's important to them. So if you have an expert, for example, that's their highest one, then those people want the acknowledgement, maybe more training or something around their particular field. of excellence will make them feel more encouraged, more accepted. And the other thing is, they really don't want to let people down. So being aware of that, these can be the workaholics where they really want so badly to support everyone to the point of burnout. So we really need to look at that. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with the technology. We can become more and more workaholics where there's less demarcation between our work life and our home life. And what I see, what's happened with COVID, we want more integration into all parts of our life. We're not happy with segregating our life and compartmentalizing our life anymore. Like if you think about a physician, especially in ER, and they're in emergency, they kind of compartmentalize those parts. But what happens, we see with people in war and all these places, then PTSD happens because they haven't actually let those emotions and situations move through them. One of the things I trained in was critical incident stress debriefing, where we have a process, you talk it out, you move through it. And that's what's important. The thing is to have the communication and the openness to discuss these things. Because it's so easy to just hang up off the phone or, not connect because we don't feel that we're being seen or heard. So really all of this is about being seen and heard for ourselves and with others. And that's the piece that's going to move beyond the technology. Technology is just a way of communicating and gathering rather than the be all and end all.
Madam, you were mentioning something about now because I'm thinking to my students with mental health problems after COVID and all this stuff. So you think that when they have a diagnosis, anyway, they it's better for them to speak out about that and to embrace it, or how? Because I don't have the tools sometimes. For example, now I have a student, he came out with this idea that he went to the psychiatrist and the psychiatrist, he said all of a sudden he's a bipolar. So I don't have the tools, and I said, okay, I respect the medical part, so it's not my things to intervene. But how, as a coach, how do I need to work with him by letting him speak out that, leave that fear he has and embrace it? Or
you can acknowledge it, right? And because this is what happens when we're young. And obviously, you're not trained in that. And bipolar is a very specific diagnosis. There are medications and things to help calm them. But it's really important that you do acknowledge that, it's like, well, we can't talk about that. That was when I was growing up. We never talked about my mom's mental illness. And she would just go off to hospital or whatever. And that was part of the problem, right? We see that with abuse and different things. It's the secret that causes the problem because we don't get to speak it. So just acknowledging, if they're having challenges, oh yeah, I see that you are feeling afraid, or how are you feeling about that today? Like what's going on? Just acknowledging them so they can feel included. Maybe they don't want to participate as enough that you want or other people want in the discussion, but being okay with that and just saying, oh, are you feeling like you just need to be more quiet today? That's okay. So not pushing them to the point where they're going to feel like they're not acknowledged for who they are and what's going on with them. So the more that we do it, and I know that from my own type, right? People say, oh, it's not scary. It's not this, it's not that. Instead of saying, oh, yeah, you're afraid and, what's going on. So then we're open to the discussion. But if I shut them down, then we're not going to have an opening.
And how was for you when you the first had the diagnosis of a cancer? No, because here in in India, we say people die more for the diagnosis than for the disease itself. So, because of course the fear activates that system, not that the immune system goes down, and you are all of a sudden, you are very vulnerable and fragile to everything. So, how did you manage that? Hearing that diagnosis?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it was shocking. Everyone was shocked because I looked so healthy. You know, I ran every day, I ate really well, but I was the type A personality, and I was overstressed, but didn't acknowledge it. So my world came crashing down, and what happened for me is I was open to finding out why. I asked myself, you know, here I am at 44. How did I get here? And do I want my life to look the same? So I did an amazing retreat where it was a week of just being in this beautiful container of allowing us to look at different parts of our life. There was 8 women. Of the group, only 2 of us are left alive. Some died within a week. So they were near death's door when we were together. And it was very sobering fact. And so for me, it was knowing that the disease was about opening to my spiritual part that I'd shut down. For some people, it's about loss. I'd had so much loss in my life already. I'd learned that lesson, but I'd really shut down that spirit part of myself, and it opened me to that. And that's where I could then start to attract the meditation that helped me, and the different ways, and get stronger and do the deeper work and be honest with myself with why I got there. And for some people, they just compartmentalize it. I was looking at doing a course for people post-cancer called What's My New Normal? And people didn't want to talk about it. So I didn't proceed with it. But, you know, that was a long time ago now. So maybe people are more open, but the more that we can say, yeah, my life isn't the same. What do I do going forward? And there was a really good book, if anyone's interested, called Dancing in Limbo. And it was about that point between finishing treatment and getting back into life. And it's like, you know, people feel I'm okay, so they've kind of left. And here I am on my own trying to figure it out. And one of the hardest things was coming back to work. And I looked okay. I still was tired. I was doing tamoxifen. I was doing these different things, but people want you to be okay. So they don't talk about it or ask how you're doing. They just want you to be okay and carry on. But I forgot how to do my job. It took me 6 months because of that trauma of the brain to get back into it slowly. Like I was shocked. How could I forget to do my job? But I did. But, you know, I had a good workplace that allowed me to do some other projects and slowly get back into it. So that's the support that we need to offer people. You're muted.
Please unmute, sir, Shukla sir, and then talk.
I don't know if
आवाज कट कट के आ रही है, आप वीडियो बंद करके ही बोलिए.
Okay, now am I audible? आवाज आ रही है?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, my question is like, you know, we are living two lives, especially the students who are learning. At home, they are having different atmosphere, and in our universities, they are having nowadays a very professional atmosphere. So, you know, how they will cope up with that. Many times it happens that they create a conflict in their mind. And I think conflict is a reason for everything, you know, whatever the disease is taking place. I'm from the medical field. So the mind and the conflict, you know, that is one of the best, very important thing to think about, because that lead to the disease condition. That is what we consider. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, so that conflict between home and their school life away from in university. And, we see this where people, I saw it with students that I knew, and, I had to go to a different town to university. But because I'd been in so many different situations where I had to adapt, like I lived with other families, I was in foster care for a while, it wasn't a big deal for me. It was just a new situation. Other people, it was their first time feeling free from constraints of the family. And then these are the ones that are partying and really feeling the peer pressure and doing things that might not be that healthy for them. So the more that we can build that resilience earlier, like we see that with, what we call helicopter parents, and where they're doing things for their kids and they're not allowing them to have experiences that they have to really learn to make decisions for themselves. It starts young, where we need to have them build those skills of resiliency and question, and especially as teens, right? That's where they get more influence from the peers. And, in my time, it still is in different ways, whether it's drinking or drugs or whatever it is, and the partying, or, it's like, I want to fit in. But if we can build those skills about consequences, and we actually give consequences, right? So often as parents, we'll say, oh, if you do this, this is going to happen, but then we don't follow through. So again, we don't learn boundaries growing up. And that's one of the main things people need to learn is, when I say something, I need to do the follow through. Otherwise, there's no consequences. And there is that part where the brain is not fully formed till like 25. And we forget that even as young people in university, their brain is still not fully formed. So the more that we can help them and direct them and say, there are consequences. And, I used to work with pairs and quads, and it was really effective when someone their own age would come and speak to them and say, I did some stupid things and these are the consequences, because we think we're invincible at that age. So being able to have the ability to question it and still test the waters, we need to. That's part of differentiating in our family and becoming independent, but to what degree? So having that open dialogue, finding out what's going on, learning what our kids are doing, right? There's, you've probably heard about what was going on with Discord and those private rooms. And, we've had so many suicides from kids that get lured into these things where they're cutting themselves and they're actually killing themselves for the pleasure of these people who think that this is cool. So the more that we can be involved, the more that we can keep that connection, because the studies have shown that the peer pressure in the family, that connection is still stronger than the peers if we keep it going. So, and allowing them, knowing you are going to be a little bit different, you are changing and growing. And again, talking about that, having that honesty. But once they have that built-in North Star for themselves, which is our feelings, how do you really feel about that? Like talking about those things. Most families don't talk about that.
Good control, if it is not there, the people consider their liberty as an indulgence. Many of the time it happens that the parental control is not there, they consider it as a liberty, and that leads to indulgence.
Yeah, I had challenges hearing that one. Yeah, there's a bit of feedback and stuff, so it's a bit of a challenge sometimes hearing what the questions are.
Yeah, yeah. I'm saying that if there is no parenthood control, the student pupil consider themselves they are liberal, and there is a liberty, but that liberty goes towards indulgence.
Mm. Yeah, indulgence, right? Yeah, and that's where we see this even with hiring. One of the things the map is used for is hiring to see if people's motivation are in line with the job role. And there are stories of parents calling the interviewers or, stepping in. And it's like there's these extremes, right? The liberal, do whatever you want, or I'm so involved that there's no middle ground. And so yeah, education for the parents, right? And when you've been so liberal, it's a little bit harder to rein that back, but again, having that honest discussion. Yeah, we've let you do everything. We thought that was the right way to parent because we didn't have that. We felt these restrictions, right? It's that swinging back and forth until we can find that middle ground. And I realized that wasn't the best thing. And let's talk about how that could be different, where maybe I can support you more in building that resiliency, building that way of checking in with yourself. It's really integrity, but we don't necessarily need to use that word, but that congruence between what I want in the world and how I see myself. Like, where are those challenges for you, and asking them questions. And so you're not just telling them and just saying, this is how we were, and now we're going to kind of clamp down. But it's like, if the parents don't want to do that, unfortunately, right, unless they have some other mentor, it doesn't matter who the mentor is. Like for me, my first one that really helped me to find that value for myself was my foster mom, because she was interested in what I was doing. She really supported me. Her son played guitar, and she went to the welfare for me and said, I want to get Robyn a guitar. And she fought for me like the mother bear. And I didn't have that before. So that really helped me. Sometimes it can be a university professor or a TA or, another student. So how can we build those relationships? We have an organization here. I don't know if you have it there, Big Sisters and Big Brothers. And I did a year as a big sister. And her dad lived in a fantasy world. And her mom was off with her new boyfriend. And she thought, I'm just going to get married and everything's going to be fine. Instead of the reality of, how high divorce is, and the statistics show that most women are going to be on their own at some point in their life because we live longer. So helping her to see different ways and helping her build some responsibility around money, and seeing it like offering her, saying, I'll give you a portion of the money towards the camp, but you need to also bring some money in. So how can we do that? So mentors can be a lovely example of ways to help some of these people that didn't get it in their family. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for, I know it's later than you normally, so 8 a.m. is a good start for me, but I know it's your evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.